March 9th, 1953. Joseph Stalin is dead. His mourners fill Red Square. His heirs line the top of the mausoleum where he'll be buried. They pledge to work together. Even as they do, they begin to plot to destroy each other. Within 4 months, Beria, the head of the secret police, is liquidated. 3 contenders for Stalin's power remain. Malyankov, the shrewd bureaucrat. Molotov, the tough old revolutionary. Khrushchev, secretary of the Communist Party, almost unknown outside the Soviet Union. The struggle to succeed Stalin will go on for 5 years. Only he will survive. This is the story of how he survived.
Мы вас не добили под Сталинградом, на Украине, в Белоруссии. Если вы будете укать против нас и будете опять готовить нападение, мы так ухнем, что больше не будешь укать.
This is the second of 2 reports on a struggle that took place inside the Soviet Union between 1952 and 1958. The outcome of that struggle changed the face of communism in the world. This report concerns Nikita Khrushchev, how he rose to power, the conditions that made his rise possible, the tactics he used. The time, May 1st, 1953. The place, Moscow. May Day, the first public celebration since the death of Stalin. Red Square wears a new look. No military men appear among the leaders. No new weapons are on display. It will be 3 months before the Russians explode their first H-bomb. The new leaders talk peace. In Korea, they have made concessions to the West. They talk coexistence. The atmosphere in Red Square is relaxed, almost gay. In the Kremlin, a bitter struggle for political survival has begun. The issue seems undramatic. Should the Soviet Union produce more machinery or more consumer goods? But the prize for the winner is the power Stalin once held. On the side of more machinery, the new party secretary, Nikita Khrushchev. To some, a country bumpkin. Flora Lewis, correspondent in Eastern Europe for the Washington Post.
They were disdainful of Khrushchev. They used to call him kukuruzhnik, and the word means corn, but what they meant by it was hayseed. It was a form of criticizing his rowdy, boisterous manners. And I remember one young man saying to me, but how can we be represented by somebody like that in the world? He doesn't even know how to use his knife and fork right.
Opposing Khrushchev, favoring less machinery, more emphasis on consumer goods, is Chairman Georgy Malyankov. He is backed by the new men, the technicians of the government bureaucracy. This is Sir William Hayter, in 1953, British ambassador to the Kremlin. He sees both Khrushchev and Malyankov in action.
I think most of us probably had our money on Malyankov. We thought he was the one most likely to get away with it. He was in a very powerful position. He was Stalin's heir. He had the support of the party, so it seemed, and he had the temperament which seemed to most likely to succeed. He was very calm, reserved, seemed rather cunning, very clever. Khrushchev, on the other hand, seemed to be rather all over the place.
Khrushchev is all over the place, but with a purpose. His political base is the Communist Party. He tours the Soviet Union like a ward politician. He is the first communist leader to go to the people for support.
В союзе с беднейшим крестьянством под руководством коммунистической партии
Moscow, August 8th. The Supreme Soviet, the Parliament, meets. To be discussed, Chairman Malyankov's program. Malyankov says war is unthinkable. He says the food problem is solved. Now we can make more consumer goods. In September, Khrushchev answers. He says, we need machines, not consumer goods. We have not solved the food problem. We need tractors to grow more food. On this issue, Khrushchev will make his fight. Every Soviet citizen understands what he is saying. Soviet agriculture has never been able to feed the Soviet people. Now Khrushchev offers a plan. Cultivate this virgin land, 1,500 miles from Moscow, in Kazakhstan. People are uprooted, sent out in caravans to land as barren and empty as the old American West. Their job? To grow food on it, fast. New cities begin to go up. Roads and fields are cut out of trackless wastes. Khrushchev comes out to inspect the new lands. He has risked his political life on this plan. He has promised to solve the food problem. If he fails to keep his promise, the cost to him will be very high. The new lands deliver a bumper crop. It does not matter that in the future the crops will fail. Khrushchev has succeeded when he needs to succeed. The new lands have served his political purpose. September 1954, Khrushchev flies to China. At the Peking airport, he is greeted by Mao Zedong. In 5 years, they will be deadly enemies. Now, they are allies. For the moment, their interests are the same. Mao needs Soviet heavy machinery to industrialize. Khrushchev needs it for his virgin lands. He seeks Chinese support against Malyankov. He gets it. The struggle between Khrushchev and Malyankov goes on, unseen by the outside world. One of the first Americans to know the turn it has taken is a former UNRWA official named Marshall McDuffie, who knew Khrushchev in the Ukraine after the war. He sees Khrushchev February 1st, 1955.
Now, I'd seen him previously in a side street headquarters of the Communist Party. But this time I was summoned on an hour's notice by the officials of the government, and they said you can have an interview with Mr. Khrushchev at 4 p.m. Instead of taking me onto a side street, they wheeled me directly into the Kremlin and up to a building which I had known from what I had read had been where Stalin's office had been in the past. I went up to the second floor, escorted by a green-hatted official of the NKVD. And as I entered the cloakroom, I noticed on the hooks hanging there 5 coats of marshals of the Soviet Army and several coats of admirals. And I wondered if the whole Soviet Union was there that day. Mr. Khrushchev was sitting in the office, an office about 50 feet long by 20 feet wide, and he was at the head of a very long table covered with green felt. And he was sitting in a chair reading the newspaper, leaning back like this, his paper in his hands and 2 newspapers in front of him. Behind him was a desk with 3 black phones, and on his own desk were a green phone and a black phone. The only difference I noticed was that when he was in the Communist Party headquarters, he had a green phone and a black phone and a red phone. We think that the black phone was for normal work and the green phone was for party work, And the red phone was to call the Kremlin. He didn't need a red phone this time. He was in the Kremlin.
The official announcement appears in Pravda and then in other newspapers. Cool, tough, intelligent, Malyankov is the first victim of Khrushchev, the country bumpkin. 3 men took power when Stalin died. Beria was the first to fall. Malyankov is the second. Only Molotov remains. Khrushchev has divided his rivals. He has allied himself with Molotov to overthrow Malyankov. Now Molotov blocks his path to power. Molotov is Khrushchev's next target. February 8, 1955. The Supreme Soviet meets. Malyankov is under attack. One charge against him is that he had a weak foreign policy. This charge is heard by Severin Bialer, then a staff member of the Polish Central Committee.
A letter of the Soviet leaders circulated among the inner party circles. I read this letter, and this letter stated the reasons why Malyankov was removed. They accused him of what I believe is one of the most important sin, namely of underestimating the power of the Soviet Union and overestimating the power of the Western states. In other words, they accused him of seeking some kind of an accommodation with the West not from a position of strength, but from a position of weakness.
The same month, Khrushchev speaks on foreign policy. He changes his position. He now moves toward Malyankov's position. He criticizes the position of his ally, Molotov. Molotov is Stalin's old comrade. He is the foreign minister. He is being attacked in the field in which he made his great reputation. The issue is Yugoslavia. Tito defied Stalin. Stalin banished him from the communist empire. Tito survived. He turned to the West. Khrushchev proposes to win him back. Molotov argues any overture to Tito would seem a sign of weakness.
I have access to materials which show that in the spring of 1955, a meeting of the Soviet Presidium took place where Khrushchev proposed to send a delegation to Yugoslavia to re-establish relations with Tito. He also proposed to achieve some kind of a compromise in the Austrian problem. Molotov was opposed to those propositions, but he was voted down, and so a Soviet delegation led by Khrushchev went to Yugoslavia.
Khrushchev goes without Molotov. It is his first trip outside the communist empire, his first experience as a diplomat. His troubles begin at the Belgrade airport. Tito, too, regards him as a country bumpkin. Khrushchev tries to blame Beria for what has happened between Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union. Tito is formal, correct, almost contemptuous of his guest. That night, there is a reception at the old royal palace. Its purpose is to humiliate the Soviet barbarian. Only Khrushchev and his party are not in formal dress.
There he was, a tiny little man, bald, unimpressive looking, in a mauve-colored flapping suit with a tie that didn't show, I forget what color it was, light gray, light blue, didn't show against the suit or against his shirt, with blinking in these immense lights, which he had never met before because he had never had this kind of public appearance.
Khrushchev, Tito, and the communist elite go into a private room. The festivities continue. Everyone waits to see what the Russian barbarian will do next. It's after midnight when Khrushchev appears again, supported by Mikoyan. Russian-speaking correspondent Philippe Ben acts as interpreter for the press.
I came near to him and heard that he was complaining about drinking too much, but repeated, "I feel so good, I feel so good." Suddenly, he freed his hands and approached Madame Tito, and he kissed her on one cheek, and after on the second, he took from the table a big flower vase and presented the flowers to Mrs. Tito. He talked, and finally Mikoyan got a bit impatient. He took him by hand and whispered to his ear, "Let's go, Nikita Sergeyevich, let's go, it's late." Khrushchev wouldn't listen. "No, you think I am drunk? I am not. You are Armenian, you can't drink as much as me, but I feel well, I feel very well."
Next morning, in the harsh light of day, it is time for the signing of a declaration of goodwill. For Khrushchev, there is still another humiliation. He is not allowed to sign the declaration. Tito insists that it be signed by Bulganin, who represents the Soviet government, not the party. Khrushchev is shunted to the end of the table. On this trip, Khrushchev has been insulted, laughed at, made to look foolish, but he has gotten what he wanted. The first step has been taken to bring Yugoslavia back into the communist empire. June 4th, the Central Committee meets. The meetings will last 8 days. The agenda, Yugoslavia. Molotov will bluntly warn Khrushchev, if you continue on your present course, there will be trouble in Poland, revolt in Hungary. Molotov will be ignored. The meetings are secret, but details leak out to high communist officials.
At this meeting, Khrushchev firstly presented the case against Molotov to the Central Committee members. Then Molotov was permitted to take the stand and to present his side of the story. And then, in the discussion, the other members of the Presidium made speeches, and it was obvious that nobody at the whole meeting was supporting Molotov. To show a few examples how personal and strong this attack was on Molotov, let me, for example, quote one scene when Molotov was saying that he protests against Khrushchev and Bulganin going to Tito, trying to a reconciliation on a party level. Then Khrushchev interrupted him and says, "Yes, but in 1939, you went to Berlin. You saw Ribbentrop. You could shake the hand of Hitler and Ribbentrop. But you don't want us to shake hands with Tito, who is not a Nazi, but who is building communism in Yugoslavia." Then later, as another example, in his closing speech, Khrushchev faced Molotov and says, "You know that you are under the influence," rather he used the phrase, "under the heel of your wife. Your wife is a very ambitious woman. She's trying to influence you. So you will seek power. And if you will listen to your wife, you will be in big trouble."
Khrushchev's next move is toward Washington. He asks for a summit meeting. There are some matters he would like to negotiate. Besides, he wants the prestige of dealing with the American president, face to face. Secretary of State Dulles replies. He says the Russians must show their intentions with deeds, not words. Khrushchev responds. He signs the long-delayed peace treaty with Austria. Soviet troops begin to pull out of the Soviet zone voluntarily. It is the only such occasion in Soviet history. Khrushchev has delivered the deeds Dulles demanded. In July, Khrushchev gets his summit. Again, he has paid a price. Again, he is getting what he wants. The country bumpkin appears on the world stage as the equal of the famous American president. On the issue of free elections in Germany, the Soviet Union seems to give in. In return, Khrushchev feels he gets an unspoken pledge from Eisenhower. No U.S. aid to Soviet satellites if they should revolt. He will report back to the Kremlin. Another success. He has proved Molotov wrong. Molotov, like Malyunkov, has underestimated the country bumpkin. With Bulganin, Khrushchev begins a tour of the Far East. Once again, he has used a policy issue as a political weapon. Now he seems like a man without a care in the world. Even as Khrushchev travels across Southeast Asia, he is getting ready to make his final move to try to destroy his last rival in the Soviet Union. Moscow, February 24th, 1956. Inside the Great Hall of the Kremlin, the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is meeting. 1,350 Soviet delegates, hundreds of foreign communists are present. It is the first Congress in 3 years, the first without Stalin. For 10 days, it has been uneventful. Now, on the 10th night, a closed session is suddenly announced. Foreign communists are barred. The session lasts until 3 a.m. When it ends, Khrushchev cautions the delegates, we cannot let this matter get out of the party, especially not to the press. By morning, as Muscovites go to work, everybody has heard a version of what Khrushchev has said. One of the first Westerners to hear about it is UPI correspondent Henry Shapiro.
I first heard the details from a friend, a student at Moscow University, who had heard the speech read at an ordinary public meeting. According to my friend, Khrushchev had denounced Stalin, accusing him of lies and slander in order to carry out a program of mass terror. Among other things, he said that Stalin had ordered the arrest and execution of 70% of the members of the Central Committee in 1934. He had also ordered the execution of 5,000 high army officers. He further accused Stalin of increasingly abusing his power, so that in the last 15 years of his life, most of the members of the Politburo were in mortal fear of him. And of course, he stressed that Stalin had used the secret police in order to strike terror among honest party workers. As I said earlier, I got these details from a student friend and had it confirmed later from other sources. The story spread like wildfire throughout Moscow, so that every foreign resident and every citizen of the Soviet Union knew about it. It was common knowledge.
Khrushchev has taken a calculated risk. To take Stalin's place, he must destroy Stalin's legend. Molotov warns. In the process, Khrushchev may blow apart the communist world. March 28th, Pravda denounces the cult of Stalin. The public attack on the name of Stalin begins. In East Berlin, Stalin Allee becomes Frankfurt Allee. Stalingrad will become Volgograd. The sign is changed on the roof of the Hotel Volgograd. Stalin's images are obliterated. As NBC's Moscow correspondent Irving R. Levine discovers, the facts of yesterday are no longer facts.
I had occasion to visit the Soviet Ministry of Communications rather frequently to try to arrange better broadcasting facilities. Each time I entered the building, I couldn't help but notice a larger-than-life-size bust of Stalin. However, one day, as I arrived, I noticed that the bust and its pedestal had disappeared. I turned to the doorman who had been there on each of my previous visits and asked him, "Where's the bust of Stalin today?" The Russian looked me squarely in the face, but with an obvious look of embarrassment, and replied, "There never was a bust of Stalin here."
Warsaw. It is spring. The words that Khrushchev has spoken in secret still reverberate throughout the Soviet Empire. Terror has been denounced. Fear seems ended. Polish students and intellectuals are drunk with a new sense of freedom.
Kwiatuszku mój, powiedz mi, co jeszcze życie kryje.
June 28th, Poznan, Poland. Workers from a locomotive factory begin to march through the streets to protest against their working conditions. Others join them. The protest swells into a riot against the communists. Before it is over, 35 will be dead, 270 injured, 323 arrested. September 27th, the trial of the rioters begins. It is a strange trial for a communist country. Western reporters, Western cameramen are allowed into the courtroom. The defendants are allowed to speak out. They tell how they have been tortured by the communist police. Suddenly it seems to be the communists who are on trial, the communists who are guilty. At the end, 150 of the arrested rioters are set free. The rest draw light sentences. The story of Poznan spreads across the country. Unrest grows. Poland is close to anarchy. This, Molotov supporters say, is the cost of Khrushchev's secret speech, of his visits to Tito. The Soviet Empire is a powder keg waiting for a fuse to be lit. The man who lights the fuse is Władysław Gomulka. He was once a leader of the Polish Communist Party. He was purged by Stalin. Now he is back. The anti-Stalinists rally around him. The Polish Central Committee meets. The meeting is underway when word comes that someone has arrived from Moscow. One of the visitors is Khrushchev. Another is Molotov. Molotov is no longer out of favor. His predictions have been right. Khrushchev was wrong. The Russians and Poles meet at the old Belvedere Palace. 11 Soviet marshals are present. For the Poles, the stakes are a measure of independence. For Khrushchev, political survival. As the meeting begins, Soviet tanks move on Warsaw. To save himself, Khrushchev is now ready to use force. He has not counted on the Polish response.
Gomulka warned Khrushchev, "I won't submit to your dictate. If you insist on marching on Warsaw, I will go on the air, call on the Polish people to defend themselves. Anyhow, we have already armed the workers' militia in Warsaw, and the internal security troops are already marching to meet the Soviet column, and they are ordered to shoot if the tanks persist on continuing on Warsaw."
Next day, at a rally in Łazienki Park, Gomulka is greeted as a hero. After 18 hours, he has made Khrushchev back down. He has made Khrushchev withdraw his tanks. He has sent Khrushchev back to Moscow. Gomulka tells the crowd, great evil and injustice accumulated in the life of Poland during the past years. He says, these years now belong to the irrevocable past. Budapest, 400 miles to the south. Word of what has happened in Warsaw has reached Hungary. Crowds begin to gather in the streets. By the time they reach Parliament Square, they number 40,000. They find the square filled with Soviet tanks. New York Herald Tribune foreign editor Seymour Frieden is with the crowd.
The scene was rather a pastoral one for a very brief time. Then came the rattle of gunfire from the parapets of the old buildings. This gunfire undoubtedly came from the Communist Hungarian police. Some tankers, perhaps terribly nervous and fearing that the people on the scene were shooting at them, fired point blank into the crowd. And then the tragedy occurred. I was there. I saw people just tossed aside like rag dolls by shells fired point blank range from tanks, and there was pandemonium within a matter of seconds. Thousands of people fled, streamed away, and the youngsters of Budapest began to regroup. Shooting began house to house, street to street, and this caught on. It went on all afternoon, and by sunset, Budapest was already in flames.
The fighting goes on for 2 days and 2 nights. Members of the Hungarian secret police are dragged through the streets. The Soviet regime crumbles. Anything that reminds the people of the hated Russians is destroyed. Finally, the Soviet tanks pull back. Cardinal Mindszenty is released from prison. Imre Nagy is the new premier. He tells the people that Hungary will withdraw from the Soviet bloc. Hungary will become a neutral in the Cold War. For one heady moment, it seems that the Hungarians have won their revolution.
In Eastern Europe, we have seen the spirit of freedom, swift and strong, strike through the darkness. The peoples of Poland and Hungary, brave as ever through all their history, have offered their lives to live in liberty. And as the people have risen, so have new governments, and so has new hope. In all of this, the true intent of the Soviet Union seems not yet clear.
In Moscow on this night, the fountain of Bakhchisarai is being danced at the Bolshoi Theater. Khrushchev is present. He remains throughout the entire performance. Even as he watches the dancers perform, Khrushchev is making the only move that can save his political life. He sends his tanks back into Budapest, this time in overwhelming numbers. The Hungarian freedom fighters are slaughtered. The UN, Saturday, a day of confusion. Hungary and the Suez crisis. United States Delegate Lodge asks, is it true Soviet tanks are in Hungary? Soviet Delegate Sobolov says he has no such information.
As regards the...
Mr. Lodge agrees with Mr. Sobolov to adjourn until Monday. By Monday, a Soviet-controlled Hungarian government is back in power. What is happening, they tell the UN, is an internal matter. It is no business of the UN.
Therefore, Mr. President, the Hungarian delegation will not participate in the work of the 11th session of the United Nations General Assembly as long as the discussion of the Hungarian question does not proceed in the spirit of the United Nations Charter. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Soviet-controlled Hungarian delegation walks out of the UN. In the ruins of Budapest, the Hungarian dream of freedom lies shattered. Imre Nagy is under arrest and will be executed. Hundreds of Hungarians have already been executed. The Soviet Union has made it clear to what lengths it will go when its empire is threatened. A kind of peace has been restored. Nikita Khrushchev has survived. This is the price of his survival. December 31st, 1956. It is New Year's Eve in Moscow. In the Kremlin, Nikita Khrushchev drinks a toast. He says, in foreign affairs, we are all Stalinists. As the new year begins, one fact is clear. Khrushchev is still in trouble. He has had to give ground to the Stalinists. He is fighting for his political life. At the party are many who oppose Khrushchev, who seek his overthrow. Chief among them, now holding new power and prestige, is his old nemesis, Molotov.
The bloodless Polish revolt in the fall of 1956, the Hungarian Revolution resulted in strengthening Molotov's position. The Molotov star rose once again. Those members of the Presidium which in 1955 supported Khrushchev in his fight against Molotov now were supporting Molotov himself. This set the stage for the final act of the inner Presidium struggle for power.
There were three groups in the Soviet party leadership. One was the group of the Stalinists, headed by Molotov and Kaganovich, those who didn't want any changes, who wanted the continuation of the Stalinist system. A second group you could call the economic reformers, headed by Malenkov, Bulganin, supported by Pervukhin and Zaburov, who were in favor of reforms, economic reforms, and wanted them to be led and guided by the economic people of the country. And a third group, headed by Khrushchev, were the party reformers. They were also in favor of the change, of certain changes in the Stalinist system, but wanted them to be only under the complete leadership, control and guidance of the party apparatus. The struggle was originally between all these three groups. But in spring 1957, the first and second group, the Stalinists and the economic reformers, combined themselves against Khrushchev and his group, because they were against Khrushchev's idea of a complete decentralization of economy with strong party control, and because they were against the personal power which Khrushchev had accumulated to that time.
The issue is Khrushchev's proposal to put control of economic planning in the hands of the party instead of the government. The debate on this issue goes on throughout the spring. Not a single important leader supports Khrushchev. May 1st, 1957, the traditional May Day celebration in Red Square. Leaders stand together on top of the mausoleum. There is no outward sign of the conflict that is raging among the leaders. It will be decided by the 11 members of the Presidium, now reviewing this parade. Their decision will support or destroy Khrushchev. Khrushchev himself spells out the details of how the decision will be made to Turner Catledge, managing editor of the New York Times. Then Catledge says,
I am very much interested to know how decisions are adopted by leading bodies in the Soviet Union. And he said, during the discussions, the members of the Presidium usually arrive at a unanimous point of view. If on some question unanimity cannot be reached, the problem is decided by a simple majority vote. In light of subsequent events, that has turned out to be quite a significant question.
At the beginning of June, Khrushchev and Bulganin are in Finland for a ceremonial visit. Khrushchev has forced his economic reorganization plan through the Supreme Soviet. It appears he has weathered another crisis. But back in Moscow, a new crisis has begun to take shape.
What happened was that while Khrushchev was traveling as an official guest of the President of Finland, the majority of the members of the Presidium, under Molotov's and Monikov's leadership, decided to remove Khrushchev.
June 14th, Khrushchev and Bulganin are back in Moscow. They are greeted at the airport, taken to the Kremlin. In the Kremlin, Khrushchev is brought to a meeting of the party Presidium. Molotov is there. He has been preparing for this moment for months.
Molotov attacked Khrushchev for his so many speeches he made and said, don't make so many speeches, give the people more to eat. He was attacked for his ideas and for his personal power, and it was proposed to degrade Khrushchev to a Minister of Agriculture. The Prime Minister should be taken over by Malenkov, the first secretary of the party by Molotov.
A vote is taken. It is 7-4 against Khrushchev. Majority rule has been accepted by members of the Presidium since the liquidation of Beria and the secret police. Now Khrushchev tells them 7-4 is arithmetic, comrades, not politics.
Simply banged his fist on the table and dramatically told the majority of the Presidium, you did not elect me party secretary, and you cannot remove me. I was elected by the Central Committee, and I insist on the decision being made by the committee.
This move by Khrushchev was unprecedented in the Soviet history. No Soviet leader before him did it. He appealed from the highest party body, the Presidium, to a broader party body, the Central Committee. He accomplished it because of the support of Marshal Zhukov and the army. It is very difficult to establish in detail what happened after the Presidium meeting, but we do know a few facts. Khrushchev was in control of the Central Committee. After all, as a secretary of the party, he appointed most of its members. What he had to do was to bring them very quickly to Moscow. To do this, he needed and he got the help of Marshal Zhukov. The Presidium voted down Khrushchev on its own meeting. The Central Committee overruled the Presidium. Marshal Zhukov and the army put their authority behind Khrushchev, and he won.
Khrushchev succeeded in mobilizing the party apparatus, in mobilizing the army and the air force through Marshal Zhukov, and succeeded in splitting up his enemies. He succeeded it because he knew he had the army and Marshal Zhukov behind him. He knew he had the party apparatus behind him, and he knew the psychological weakness of his enemies. They were combined against him and against his growing power, but they were in itself also divided on many issues, and they were psychologically insecure.
On July 4th, at the garden party of the American ambassador, Khrushchev makes an appearance. Molotov does not. Molotov is banished on his way to outer Mongolia. Malyankov is on his way to Siberia. Khrushchev's victory is almost complete. October 4th. This is the day that Sputnik goes up. It is also the day Marshal Zhukov, Khrushchev's new ally, begins an inspection tour of Albanian military installations. It is the day Khrushchev has been waiting for.
Khrushchev had to rely on Marshal Zhukov's aid in June 1957 during the struggle Khrushchev had led against the anti-party group. He had to rely on Marshal Zhukov and on his airplanes bringing the party functionaries to Moscow. And at the moment of the victory, Khrushchev realized that on some other occasion, somebody else might rely on Marshal Zhukov's help. Marshal Zhukov, in the struggle against the anti-party group, accused Malenkov, Molotov, and Kaganovich for their crimes during the great purges in the 30s. He even threatened to publish documents about these crimes. Khrushchev knew that, and must have felt, that Marshal Zhukov could use some documents against him, against Khrushchev too.
October 26th, Marshal Zhukov is back in Moscow. No party leader has come to greet him. 6 hours from now, he will have been stripped of his job as defense minister, on his way into exile.
It happens that a few months after the inter-party struggle was resolved, Khrushchev gave me a private interview at his office. And I sat across the table from him, face to face. We spoke in Russian without the use of an interpreter. And among many other questions, I put this one to him. About is the Soviet government now stable? Well, he smiled, and pointing a finger at him, he says, now, what do you mean by stability? He says, look, he said, we've just performed a major surgical operation. And he listed the names, men who've been in the leadership, like Molotov for so long. Could any other government have done it the way we did it? And then he even mentioned Marshal Zhukov, who had just been removed as Minister of Defense. And well, he praised Zhukov. He said he was a good soldier, still a hero. And then when I asked him whether Zhukov could be charged with any Bonapartist ambitions, he smiled and said, well, Zhukov considered himself, he fancied himself another Stalin. Well, he wasn't even half a Stalin or a quarter of a Stalin.
November 7th, the 40th anniversary of the Communist Revolution. At Khrushchev's side are the leaders of the communist world, from China to Poland. Khrushchev shows off his power, his rockets, his Sputniks. He has no rivals. He is the undisputed leader of the communist world. And at this moment, communist power and prestige are greater than they have ever been before. March 27th, 1958, the Supreme Soviet. It is proposed by Comrade N.A. Bulganin that Comrade N.S. Khrushchev be given his job as chairman of the Council of Ministers. Premier. There is no opposition. It is exactly 5 years, 3 weeks, and 1 day since Stalin died. Nikita Khrushchev, the country bumpkin, stands alone. Head of the party, head of the government. He has survived all his rivals. He is, at last, Stalin's successor. From this detailed examination of 6 years in Soviet history, several facts seem clear. The transfer of power from Stalin to Khrushchev took more than 5 years to accomplish. Khrushchev was able to overcome his rivals, but not simply by the use of naked power. His rivals were defeated as a result of their identification with foreign and domestic policy issues. These same issues continue to be factors in Khrushchev's efforts to hold the power he has gained. It's an oversimplification to say that Khrushchev now holds the power Stalin held. To remain in power, Khrushchev had to hold together a coalition of interests. He had to respond to a variety of forces. There was clear evidence of this in Yugoslavia and Hungary. There is similar evidence in later crises in Berlin, Albania, China, and Cuba. For us in the West, this is the key fact. When we examine Khrushchev's actions in foreign affairs, we must pay attention to this X factor. The X factor is the internal struggle that continues inside the Soviet leadership. Perhaps it is not possible for anyone in the West to know the extent of the influence of this struggle until after a specific crisis has passed. But that it does exist, there can be no doubt.
Народным праздником трудящихся!